Wisconsin is considered by many to be a big prize in the delegate race, and results from Tuesday's primary, they may have completely reset the contest between GOP frontrunner Donald Trump and Texas Senator Ted Cruz. And Senator Sanders' win there marks his 7th victory in the last 8 primary contests. What does that mean for Hillary Clinton's march toward the Democratic nomination? We'll talk about it with Reed Dickens, who served as the Assistant White House Press Secretary under George W. Bush. He is also president and founder of Dickens Capital Group and co-founder of Marucci Sports. Thanks for coming back, Reed.
Thanks for having me.
One of our favorite guests. Okay, was Wisconsin a rejection of Trump, or was it just a win for Cruz?
You could
argue a
argue
little bit of both.
Yeah, I would say both. I think Trump knew that he wasn't going to win Wisconsin. Ted Cruz has a phenomenal organization and ground game. Trump has never had a good ground game, so I think this wasn't a surprise. Wisconsin
never been an evangelical state. Why did Cruz do so well?
You know, if you look at the exit polls for evangelicals, their top issues are the economy and ISIS. So I don't think that the evangelicals are voting in a homogenous fashion. It's not very predictable, this race.
Should Kasich get out of the race?
So I talked to one of his top strategists yesterday, and from their perspective, if Trump doesn't have the ability to get to 1237, which you can make an argument that he does not, Kasich has just as much of a chance at the convention as anyone else. If Donald Trump doesn't win on the first ballot, or if no one wins on the first ballot, it's going to be a free-for-all, and Kasich has a lot of good numbers against Hillary nationally. So in their minds, they think they have a strong case to go to the convention and make the case that he's the best candidate for the general election.
Couldn't Trump make it if he sweeps the East on the 19th and 26th?
He can make it. He's won about 40% of delegates so far. He would have to win over 55% the rest of the way. So it's just uphill. The climb is getting steeper for him by the day.
Then it's steeper more for Cruz.
Oh, it's very steep. I don't think Ted Cruz is going to get to 1237. I think it's looking every day that goes by more and more like a contested convention. Contested convention meaning that no one's got 1237 when you arrive. Brokered convention meaning you get past that first, all the delegates become unbound after the first ballot. So I think it could be a pretty exciting convention in Cleveland.
What does your forecaster's hat say?
Ooh, well, so since I've been wrong about everything for 18 months, what I would say is if Donald Trump does not get to 1237, Ted Cruz is so much savvier, and he has such a better operation in terms of negotiating for delegates. I don't think Donald Trump even knew there was a delegate committee until last week. I don't even think he knew there was a rules committee until last week. So I think Ted Cruz has the inside track. If you get to the convention and no one's got a majority, Ted Cruz is orders of magnitude savvier than Donald Trump's organization. I think if Donald Trump's going to be the nominee, he has to get to 1237. If he doesn't get to 1237, I think you're looking at Ted Cruz or John Kasich.
And does Trump do a walkout on a third party a la?
I am done predicting what Trump's going to do. I don't know. I think that'll be a lot of people believe, and I'm talking about people close to Trump, that he never really wanted to be president, right? That this was his candidacy was a protest candidacy, and I think he's had a pretty good run. So I could see him walking away because I just don't think. I've said all along, it looks like he's self-sabotaging himself sometimes. He's too smart to do some of the things he's doing. A lot of people around him don't think he ever wanted to be the president. It's a terrible job, right? So I don't know that he'll run as a third party. I could see him taking his marbles and going back to Trump Tower.
But he won't endorse Cruz.
I don't see him doing that. And I also think we're heading towards having a pretty tough and tense relationship between Bernie Sanders supporters and the establishment. So I think on both sides, you've got a gap between the establishment and the normal Americans.
Now, Trump issued a statement slamming the establishment for propping up Ted Cruz. He said of Cruz, he's worse than a puppet. He's a Trojan horse being used by the party bosses to steal the nomination.
Yeah, so one thing Donald Trump is right about, and I want to be very clear about this, is that the establishment, and let's just say that that's the professional political class, right? So people on Capitol Hill, staffers, advisors, strategists, pollsters, people who work in the ecosystem of Washington, D.C., the thing they prize more than anything, including ideological purity, is access to the president. if they don't want someone becoming the president or the nominee, that won't take their phone call. And so the establishment is holding their nose and supporting Ted Cruz right now. They can't stand Ted Cruz, but at least Ted Cruz is one of them, and they know that if he becomes the president or the nominee, they can get a meeting in the White House. Trump, they will have no access to.
Donald Trump's campaign spokeswoman said the Bush people are now running Senator Cruz's campaign, suggests Jeb's brother Neil Bush, who joined Cruz's finance team last month, has millions of dollars invested with Common Core, Goldman Sachs, and other special interest type groups.
Yeah, so I know it's very convenient and easy to connect a lot of these dots from the outside, but I can say as a former Bushie that Neil Bush was never an integral part of the Bush campaign. He was never a strategist or a major player in the George W. Bush world. Bush people, most Bush people that I know, in fact, I don't know anyone from the Bush world that's supporting Ted Cruz, so I think that's an inaccurate statement.
Jeb Bush supported him.
Yeah, I think he did it to stay relevant in the process, because I think Jeb Bush can't stand the thought of Donald Trump winning the nomination. But the Bush people, the staff, the strategists, the supporters at the grassroots level loathe Ted Cruz.
And the Senate loathes Ted Cruz.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ted Cruz would be a distinct underdog.
So pretty much everyone who's ever known Ted Cruz, from high school to college to law school to the Bush campaign to can't stand Ted Cruz. I sat 10 feet from him. No one who knows him likes him. Most people who are working for Ted Cruz are people who just have never gotten to work in the White House. And I think Ted has a whole history of talking down to people, being very condescending, and so I think it's an interesting dance people in Washington are having to do, because they are afraid of Donald Trump because they want access, but they are having to hold their nose and support Ted.
Wouldn't Hillary be a distinct favorite to beat Ted?
Yeah, and let me say this. The reason why Hillary would be a distinct favorite is not just because of Ted Cruz. I think Ted Cruz would shrink the Republican Party smaller than it's been possibly ever. I think Donald Trump, and I want to clarify here, Donald Trump would be a blip on the radar. I don't think Democrats or Republicans view Donald Trump as a Republican. He's a celebrity. It would be like Governor Schwarzenegger in California. I don't think Donald Trump would do permanent damage to the Republican Party. I think Ted Cruz would do 30 to 40 year damage to the Republican Party. He would shrink the Republican Party. He is to the Republican Party what ISIS is to Islam, right? I mean, he is an ideological purist. And so Hillary, on the other hand, not only is she would she have a broader base than Ted, Hillary has run a really sound, disciplined campaign. I think if it's Donald Trump versus Hillary, I think Donald Trump is going to reintroduce old scandals and introduce new scandals with a ruthlessness and imagination that no normal politician ever would. I've been joking with some friends lately that I think Donald Trump will try to turn Bill Clinton into Bill Cosby. I think it'll be an uncomfortable race to watch if it's Trump versus Hillary.
What do you make of Bernie Sanders?
So I've been saying for years that I think that politics is downstream from culture. I think politics is like a delayed reflection of culture. And I think Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders reflect a majority of Americans in this country. I think about a lot of Americans are really fed up with professional politicians. They don't care who the non-politician is. They want someone who's not a politician, right, like Donald Trump. I think a lot of Americans, especially young Americans, are a little naive, and they don't really care who has to pay the bill for all the goodies that they think they're entitled to, right? What I tell people about Donald Trump is the D.C. pundits and experts are trying so hard to get Americans to be shocked about Donald Trump's rhetoric. The truth of the matter is the average American hears worse language at the office every day. What they're shocked about is that after 3 consecutive 2-term presidents, the border's still not secure, the government's spending money they don't have, the professional politicians passed a 10,000-page health care bill that's made health care costs go up and has suffocated small businesses. So people aren't shocked about Donald Trump's rhetoric. They're shocked at how incompetent professional politicians are.
There are several reports that Trump's campaign is in disarray. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I don't know that Trump's ever had a campaign operation. He's always been a cult of personality. I think what's been shocking is that typically personality cults have been on the Democrat side, going way back to Bobby Kennedy all the way to Bill Clinton. The Democrats have always had kind of cults of personality around a candidate, and Republicans have always been about building a machine. This time, Hillary's built the machine. She has a national machine. Trump is really a cult of personality. He flies to his events on his plane by himself, right? He's not conferring with national security advisors advisors. I remember when I was a young 16 years ago, I used to pick up Henry Kissinger and Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell from the airport in Austin, Texas, and take them for 3 or 4 hour policy meetings. George W. Bush wasn't prepping for a debate. He was preparing to be the president. He viewed the presidency as a burdensome job, and he was prepping every day to be the president of the United States. Donald Trump's not, he's not doing that. He's a cult of personality, and it's worked for him for most of the race.
You praise Hillary's campaign, but she's lost the last 7 of 8.
Yeah. I mean, Bernie's not going. He just raised $44 million, right? He's not going away. I think here's what I think the difference is between this time and Hillary versus Obama, Senator Obama. Hillary Clinton has most of the superdelegates. As much as Democrats like to make fun of Republicans being all the cigar-smoking fat cats behind closed doors making decisions, the truth is the Democratic system has an outdated system where you have these superdelegates. Hillary has most of the superdelegates tied up. Bernie Sanders is just kind of hoping that they'll all wake up and change their mind. Well, unfortunately, superdelegates aren't like 25-year-old kids. They're not going to just wake up and feel the burn. So I think Hillary will ultimately win the nomination because she has most of the superdelegates.
The only way that could happen is if the superdelegates thought Bernie could win and Hillary couldn't.
Well, but it's not just that they think he could win the nomination. It's about, do they think he can win the general election?
Well, he's favored over all the Republicans.
Yeah, what's deceiving is that for 6 consecutive election cycles, we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get out the vote, rock the vote. Celebrities and superstars trying to rock the vote, getting young people to get out of bed and vote on a cold Tuesday morning. The truth of the matter is they just don't do it. So a lot of Bernie's support and a lot of what you're seeing in the polls are people who are 30 and under who historically, no matter how much money is spent to rock their vote, they don't get out of bed on a Tuesday morning and go to the polls.
I'll play an interesting game with you. Hillary's the nominee. Who's her running mate?
Wow, that's a great question.
There are some people say Elizabeth Warren.
So I think Hillary is going to have such a strong campaign operation. If I were advising her, if I were made her campaign manager today, I would pick the safest pick. Because someone who's been vetted on the national stage, someone who has no skeletons, someone who's been in the public eye, someone who's been vetted by the Senate, approved, maybe confirmed by the Senate for a Senate post, a former cabinet member or something like that, I would be very safe if I were her. So because you don't want any surprises. If you're Hillary Clinton and you win the nomination and you've got a 60-day sprint to get to the election, you don't want any distractions, right? So if I were her, I would be very conservative and I would pick someone that would be safe.
Who would Cruz pick as a running mate?
Well,
who would want to run with him?
That's a tough one because I don't know many people who would want to be Cruz's vice president. The vice presidency has turned into a partnership over the last 15 years. George W. Bush treated Dick Cheney like a partner. That's been much written about, right? Peter Baker wrote a famous book about the partnership. It's almost like the vice president has a portfolio. It's almost like the CEO and the president of a major conglomeration, right? Where the president of Disney or the president of GE has a lot of authority. So it's not a funeral and wedding job like it used to be. Joe Biden had a pretty full portfolio and carried a lot of weight in the sit room when they were trying to decide whether to go in after bin Laden, So I think Ted Cruz, the first question is who would want to be his vice president? The second thing is I don't think he could pick another young buck, right? He would have to, I think he'd have to have some gray hair, a grizzled
How about the female governor of South Carolina?
So Governor Haley is I think one of the top choices for anyone who wins the nomination. I think if Ted were wise, though, Governor Haley is kind of prone to controversy, and I don't think Ted needs any more controversy. And by the way, Governor Nikki Haley is a friend of mine. I was texting with her the other day. I'm a big fan of hers. I think she's done a fantastic job as governor. I think she's pro-jobs. She's pro-manufacturing. I love her. But as a vice president pick, I think you want to have someone who adds value and doesn't add distractions. I think John Kasich would be the ideal choice.
Would he run with him?
That's the big question.
Are you surprised that Bernie split the women's vote in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I am. There's been a lot of things surprising. I don't think as you look at the polls and the exit polls of females, they don't seem to be too concerned with voting for a woman. I think that may be an outdated assumption, right? Yeah. Hillary last time was talking about cracking the glass ceiling. Young girls don't seem to be inspired by that.
Read, always great.
It was great. I enjoyed it.
Read Dickens. He's the best.